what's up? Tyson France with Motion Revolver here. Thanks a lot for purchasing the Bracket Madness project. We'll dive right in here to show you how it works. I wanted to split the tutorials up into sections so that it was easier to go through everything. Instead of doing everything within one tutorial, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of the structure of the project. So once you open up the zip file, and you'll see you have your After Effects project files here. Obviously, there's a CS6 version and a CC version, so depending on which version of After Effects you're using, that's how you'll decide which project to use. There's the README file, which contains some important links, like fonts and audio and whatnot. You already found the tutorials and obviously the thank you file. So just to give you a quick overview of the way the project is set up. Once you open up the file, there are 4 folders here. One is where you import all of your assets that you'll need, whether it's logos, team logos, audio, video, anything that you're going to need for the project. Import them into these individual folders here. Step 2 is where you would customize the global appearance of graphics within the project, and we'll cover that in the subsequent tutorials. Step 3. This is where all of the bracket stuff lives, and there will be a separate tutorial file specifically just covering the brackets. And then step 4 is just the broadcast package graphics. So the intro, the lower thirds, the scoreboards, backgrounds, and transitions. So everything is right here for you to create your video project. But I just wanted to give you a quick overview. Please move on to the next tutorial where we will cover customizing the global appearance. All right, so changing the overall look of the project is fairly straightforward. Now, because everything's built in After Effects, obviously we can make individual changes to each of the specific comps. But if we want to make broad sweeping changes to the overall look of the project, we can accomplish that by, I'm actually going to make these green to make them a little bit visually easier to digest. All right. So if we want to make broad sweeping changes to the entire look of the project, step 2, global appearance, is where we do it. So once we twirl that open, we'll see there's 2 more folders in here, the broadcast logo / title, and then the customize appearance. So let's just go ahead and twirl this open. This is where the main logo lives. So if we open up this main logo comp and kind of scroll through here, I'll turn the transparency off, you'll see this is where the main animation happens. Now, chances are the title of your project isn't going to be College Bracket Madness. You're probably going to want to change it to March Madness, and maybe even include the NCAA logo and stuff like that. But due to licensing restrictions and registered trademarks and stuff like that, as After Effects artists, we're not allowed to use those sorts of things in advertising materials. So I had to come up with a generic logo and title for the project. So say, for example, you wanted this to say March Madness. These are live text layers. So all you would need to do is take your type tool by hitting Command T, or just go up here to your type tool and double click on the bracket layer to highlight the entire text. And then we'll just type in March. And there we go. Click away. And now we have March Madness. And we can even change college to NCAA if we wanted to. And we'll go down here to the timeline to move that over. Actually, what we'll do, we'll use the anchor point to slide that back over. Right there. Maybe a little bit more. Maybe a little bit less. Maybe a little bit less. Whoop. All right. So if you like the overall design of this title with the little bracket graphics and stuff like that, please, by all means, use this. These are all live text layers down here in the timeline, so all of this can be edited, the timing and such. These layers up here are light sweeps. So if I scroll through here, you'll see there's a light source that sort of passes over the graphic, and that's what each one of these does. So it has a light sweep effect applied. So if you don't like that light sweep, you can always just turn these layers off and there won't be a light sweep. But we'll leave them on for now. And then, of course, if you don't like this logo at all and you want to use a completely different one, if you want to use the official March Madness logo, please feel free to import it and use it here. Just drop it into this composition and size it accordingly, and you'll see how it reflects throughout the project, and everything should update fine. But that's the main title. And then there's usually, with these sorts of shows, there's usually March Madness presented by AT&T or some other sponsor. So this is a little module that you can insert a logo and some text, and says presented by. Again, also, as far as global appearances go, we advise that you use the fonts that are included with this project, or not included, but the fonts that are used with this project, because the registration points, how they sit on the graphics and such, is sort of important. I think just as long as you use a capitalized condensed font, you should be fine. You might have to resize some things, but we're using a font called Teco or Tico. It's a free font. There's a link to the file in the README right here, the Tico font. Just click on that, and you can download it for free. There's also another font used on some of the scoreboard screens called Open Sans, and that you can download from multiple sources, but I've included a link to the Font Squirrel file there. So again, it's sort of important to use these fonts, but not completely vital. All right, so that's everything in the broadcast logo title folder. Moving on to number 2, which is where we customize the overall appearance. Now, first composition here is the global background. And what we have here is a nice blue background with some streaks flying out, and these are pre-rendered effects, the flare and everything, so zero plugins are required for using this. But our main colored layer here in the timeline, we want to make sure that our effects control window is open to make editing this easier. If you don't see this little window somewhere on your interface, just go up to Window and make sure the little checkbox or check mark is next to Effect Controls, so that you'll be able to edit this easier instead of opening everything on the timeline. But if we highlight the main color layer in the timeline, and this tint effect pops up, if we change the top swatch to something else like bluish, now we have, or bluish red, now we have a bluish to red gradient. We can change this to any color we want, really. And the flare stays the same color. Now, so say, for example, we wanted this to be red, but the flare is still red, or still blue. We can change this as well. All you really need to do is just hit the E key, highlight the tint effect, copy it by hitting Command-C, highlight the flare layer, and duplicate. Oh, that doesn't work. So we're going to have to turn off. And I actually have to turn off this expression that allows the, let's see, we'll make that red, and we'll make the black black. Oh, that didn't work at all. All right, disregard everything I just showed you. Another way to do this somewhat easily is just highlight the flare effect, or flare layer, go up to Effect, color, we could go to tint, but actually what we're going to do is we are going to, where are you? Color, why am I not seeing it? Oh, color correction and hue and saturation. And then we can actually, we could twirl this thing around here and make it a little bit redder. As you can see, we can even click colorize, and that will actually colorize the whole thing, which make it a little bit redder instead of as blue. But I think you get the idea. I won't spend too much time messing with this. We'll revert back here to, just go back, Command-Z, going back. All right, I think we're back to our default. Okay, so that's the global background. We have a spinning basketball here and whatnot. We can play with the effects as far as, let's see, a basketball. We have a horizon glow. We can change the color of that. Ah, that's what it was. Okay, so the horizon glow color, if we change that to red, and then we change the background to red. See, that's why it wasn't exactly working for me. So there you go. That's how that works. All right. So you can change the horizon glow color, and you can change the main color background as well. All right. So moving on to the next composition, the graphics customization. We have a representation here of one of our seed modules, and this actually applies to some of the other graphics within the project, like on the scoreboard and lower thirds and stuff like that, since they're all basically based on the same color scheme and everything like that, and same design. So any changes that we make in this composition will reflect throughout the entire project. So again, you want to make sure that your effects control window is open, and this keeps scaling on me. I'll pop that back up. All right. So these little swatches here we want to click on to change the colors of things. So for example, our seed panel is the panel that the seed number sits on. So we have Video Hive here as the number 2 seed. So if we change this seed panel, there's a ramp effect applied. And whatever we change this color to, like, let's see, let's make this like maybe like a dark red. And then a seed number, we can lighten that up. So for example, we'll just jump ahead here and show you let's see. All right. Actually, we'll stick within this composition. Okay. So we'll revert back to the original. And then the team panel, same idea. We could change the color here if we wish. And team text color. And then the record color. And then this is the gloss effect that goes across the entire graphic. So if we click on this gloss swatch in the timeline here and hit the T key for the opacity, we can play with the strength of that. The default is 20%, but we can bump that all the way up to 100% if we want a lot more gloss, or we can just put it to 0 if we don't want it to be glossy at all. And now we have a completely different look, which is a little bit flatter. Now, this logo background is changed in the actual logo composition itself, which we will cover in the bracket customization tutorial. But this is basically just to customize the overall global graphics for the entire project. But I think we've covered everything in the global appearance composition, or in the global appearance folder. So please move on to tutorial number 3, which will actually be about the broadcast graphics. All right, moving on to the broadcast graphics. We'll open up folder 4 here, which displays everything that's included with the project: intros, lower thirds, scoreboards, backgrounds, and transitions. So if we open up the intro folder and we see our intro comp here, we just scroll through, see the light burst, and this is a real quick, simple intro, nothing too fancy, just to get into the show, and then zooms out. Not much to customize here other than the logos and stuff, which we actually covered in the previous tutorial, but just to quickly show you where that is again, in the global appearance, just go up here to the broadcast logo / title and open up main logo, and this is where everything can be adjusted. But again, for more in-depth on how to customize this, please see the global customization tutorial. So that's the intro. Not a ton in here really to customize. I mean, obviously everything's built in After Effects except for the pre-rendered graphics, but as far as timing and everything, you can adjust the keyframes on the control layer if you want a faster or slower intro, stuff like that. But that's the intro. So we'll move on to, close that, move on to the lower thirds. So there's 3 lower third files. There's the long version, the medium version, and the short version. And each one of these lower thirds contains an editable text layer. So we'll just work on, and it also contains the main logo, which we also animated in the previous tutorial. But if we double click on this live text layer, we'll just call that lower third text layer. We can also add additional lines to this. So we'll just make this text a little bit smaller, and then maybe we'll duplicate it by highlighting the layer and hitting Command D. We'll move that down. We'll change this to Open Sans, which is the other font that we're using in this project. Make that bold, make it much smaller, maybe 62, and additional line for more information. So as you can see, it's rather easy to add additional lines and information, and everything's easily updated. There's a reveal layer that brings everything on. And now these lower thirds don't animate off the screen. So if you want them to kind of animate off, they would need to be used as a pre-comp and then either faded out or slid off the screen or something like that. But all of these work in the same exact fashion. They're just different links for depending on how much information you need to display. But that's pretty much it. So moving on to the scoreboards, this is where everything gets a little bit more in-depth. So we'll open up our in-game here first, the scoreboard in-game. Now these can all be duplicated as well. I should have mentioned this with the lower thirds. You're probably going to need more than one lower third graphic. So all you have to do is highlight the composition and hit Command D, and you can duplicate that as many times as you need. So now we have 6 lower third graphics. So we'll just revert back. Same thing with these scoreboards. You can duplicate them as many times as you need. So this in-game lower third, let's see if I have any images in here. I don't believe that I do. Let's see. We'll just throw that in here. So I'm just going to throw in some footage so that you can kind of see what's going on here. So this is the in-game lower third. You can change the team name. So let's say this is Envato, Team Envato. This is Team Motion Revolver. And as you can see, that's kind of long. So we could do one of two things, or both. We can either bring down the tracking so that it fits. And we can also lower the font size so that it fits. And then scores, obviously. In After Effects, obviously, this wouldn't be live scoring. You would need a broadcast environment to do something like this. But you could just remove these scores if you want to use the graphic for the lower third. Same thing with the time. You would have to remove all these graphics for it to work within a broadcast environment. But you can use this as a template if you wish. Obviously, the seeds are also updatable. So there we go. That's how we can update this graphic. We'll move on to, I'm actually going to copy this footage layer. We'll go to the billboard graphic. Put that down here. Okay. There we go. Wait a minute. All right. I'm actually going to flip this. Make it easier to see. Okay. So this this billboard graphic actually animates onto the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and preview render this to give you an idea what this looks like. So we have our video playing in the background, and then say we're at the end of the game and we want to show the final score, final stats. You could use this as a halftime graphic. It animates on the screen and it shows the score and stats if you wish. So like for example, this team layer right here could be Envato. So we can designate that with like an ENV, And motion revolver we can designate with an MR. And then we can actually change these. We can change the justification to centered and then slide that over. And now everything's center justified on those graphics. These are also live text layers. So if we want, let's call it, let's get John Smith, 46 points, 14 rebounds. So, for example, you could do stuff like that. We can play with the weight. So if we wanted, for example, the player name to be like Boulder, we could do stuff like that. So that's how we can update that. Again, we can change the seed and the, whoops. We can change the seed and the team name here. And there we go. It's also even got a title, so we can play with the title as well. So if we wanted that to say, you know, instead of College Bracket Madness, it could say March Madness Sweet 16, something like that. So there we go. That's how we can update that. And then obviously everything renders just as we updated it. All right. And then, last but not least, the box score graphic, which is essentially has all the same elements, just more information. So there's spaces for additional stats. Now, obviously, these stats down here are just suggestions as a layout. What I did is I actually used some of ESPN's graphics and how they laid things out as a reference as to what sort of graphics and what sort of statistics are typically shown at the end of a basketball game. So you can use something like that as a template for where you want to place things and such. But everything in here is customizable and live and updatable just like the other scoreboards are. There is no animation here except for the background. Typically a recap score or box score like this doesn't have any build to it, so it just kind of sits on the screen with an animated background, so that's how this one is built. But that covers the scoreboards, I believe, so we'll move on to the next thing, which is backgrounds, which is about as simple as it gets. There's two different backgrounds in this project. A clean background here, which is background number 2, with no basketball, and these are loopable, by the way, and background 1, which has a rotating basketball. So if the basketball's in your way or you find it distracting for whatever you're displaying on the background, you can use background 2, which is completely clean. And then finally, folder number 5 is the transitions. There are 2 transitions in this project. One is a center wipe with the logo that kind of builds on. Obviously, this transition text won't be there. That was there for the preview. And then it wipes away. And then transition 2 is one where the graphic animates on from the bottom of the screen, and the logo / title actually begins to fly on over the video before the background itself comes on. So it does that, and then the title zooms straight toward us and then stops. So the final frame of this transition is actually, I'll set up a preview here to show you how this works, how these transitions work. So transition 2, just to show you how it works. So the final frame is light gray. So the next frame will be blank, which is where you want to place the beginning of your next video. So let's see what we have here. We'll just grab a clip, scale that up. Okay, so put the beginning of our clip there so that when the animation ends, we'll see here. Actually, what I'll do is I'll put another video clip in here so you can see what it looks like. End that about halfway through right there. Double the size. Turn that audio off. Okay. And here we go. Oh, I gotta scale that down because it's a smaller comp. Okay, here we go. We'll preview render it. So we have our first clip, which has no motion, so we can't really see that it's a video clip. So why don't I do this? All right, we have our first video clip, and then animation with a transition. I'm actually rendering in the background, so the previews are a little bit slow right now. But we have our transition, which goes full screen right about halfway through that transition layer. Then the logo begins to zoom towards the camera. Final frame is full light gray, so that the next frame is our next video clip, creating a seamless transition. So that's transition 2. Now transition 1 works in the same fashion. Excuse me. The only difference is we just want to make sure that both clips are meeting somewhere in the middle. And as you can see, it goes full frame, and I have it too big again, 50%. All right, let's try this again. Come on, you can do it. All right, there we go. So there's our transition 1. It's a center wipe, real simple, but works with the project design. All right, so I believe that covers the broadcast graphics. It's a small package, but it should contain everything that you need to create a professional looking coverage for the March Madness basketball tournament. But all right, so as far as customizing the brackets go, please go ahead and open up tutorial number 4, which will be all about customizing the bracket graphics. All right, now moving on to customizing the bracket graphics. So we'll open up folder 3, which is where all of our bracket graphics live. Now, we've already customized the overall look of those graphics in tutorial 2, which is how we covered the global appearance customization. So if you haven't watched that, please do so. So we'll open up folder 1 here, which is where we input our information. So clearly with the NCAA March Madness tournament, there are 64 teams at the very beginning. So if you're covering this from the very beginning, chances are you're going to need to prepare and import 64 team logos. Now, you don't have to import the logos. You could actually remove the Video Hive placeholder logo and just leave that little module blank. It may not look as good without the logo, but you could customize the color of the background tab next to the team name and stuff like that. Or you could even import, like a generic show logo or whatever title that you're using for the show. But traditionally, broadcast or bracket graphics contain the team logo, so that's what we're going to do here. So twirling open the team logos reveals 4 more folders, and this is where we need to understand how this project is built. Now, brackets are typically, let's actually open up this, open up the main bracket here, kind of show you how this works. So this region was already customized by me for the preview video, so that's why it is filled in and the rest aren't. But going back to why there are 4 folders within these team logos. The 4 folders, A1, A2, B1, and B2, represent the different quadrants of this 64-team bracket. So A1 is this region here, A2 is this region here, B1 is this region here, and B2 is this region here. Now, obviously, in the NCAA March Madness tournament, those regions are usually East, West, Midwest, and South. The reason I couldn't call these regions by those names is because the different regions face each other in a different way each year. So basically what I'm trying to say is the East and West don't always play, the Midwest and the South don't always play. They always mix it up. So one year you might have the East region here, the next year you might have the East region here, and so on. So they sort of move around, which is why I couldn't lock them in as actual regions, because it sort of moves around. So while you're working through the bracket customization process, it's usually a good idea to go in here and name things so that you know what you're working with. So say for the year 2017, I actually don't have an example of that bracket on me here. You know what? Let's go to ESPN and see if I can find fantasy tournament challenge. Let's see. Create bracket now. Create a bracket. Let's just create a bracket here. Rejoin. Continue. Oh, okay. So we can't actually view the bracket yet. So that's why I don't have an example, because the brackets don't exist. So we're just going to have to kind of make something up here. So let's pretend that this region right here, A1, is actually the East region. So if we double click on this region here, that opens up the main comp with all the live layers. So let's go ahead and double click on this text layer here and call this East. And I don't know, where is the East region playing this year? Let's just say it's playing in Philadelphia. And then you can add the dates if you wish, but we won't. We'll just leave that as a location. So now you can see in our main 64 team bracket, now this says East and then the location of where the actual tournament is taking place. And you can do that with the rest of these regions as well. You can name them. And then if you want to go one step further and make sure that everything stays as organized as possible, in these folders here where it says A1 and then rename region, that's exactly what you want to do. You want to click on that and rename it East. Because now we know what this is. So let's pretend A2 is the Midwest, B1 we'll call the West, and B2 we'll call the South. So we'll also do that here. So A2 is the Midwest. Won't worry about a location there. B1 is the West, and then B2. Whoops, that's not what we wanted to do. B2 is the South. All right. So we have all of our regions named now, and we changed the name of our folder. But then again, when we go ahead and twirl open the folder, it still says A1 logo seed 01. Now, I don't necessarily recommend that you go in here and change the name of all of these. That would be actually quite tedious. You can leave them the way they are. Just know that when you're working on these, you can now reference, okay, what region am I working in? I'm working in the East. That's what A1 is. A1 is this quadrant, A2, B1, B2. All right, now that we have that covered, and I hope that's easy enough to understand. It was quite nerve-wracking process to try to figure out the best way to go about this. But anyway, we'll move on. Okay, so we'll back up here and show us where we're at. We're in the team logos, and then we're going to twirl open East, and now we're going to open up the first composition in here. And now there's 16 of these compositions in each one of these folders because there's 16 seeds in each region. So if we open that up, we have the Envato logo imported here. Now, obviously, we're not working with Envato. I don't know if I don't have the actual, let's see. I'll import the Villanova logo here just to kind of show you an actual logo. So I just imported the Villanova logo, and I'll drop it in. And then actually, you know what I'm going to do? This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to open up the Midwest and open up A2. This is what an actual composition will look like when you open it. It'll contain the Video Hive logo, which you can replace. Again, as I was describing earlier, if you don't want to import 64 logos, I understand. And if you don't want to use the Video Hive logo, you can just turn it off And then, or you can actually delete the file from the project, which will remove them from all compositions. And if you want, you can change the color of the background. And this works for every single one of these logo comps. You can change the background. But what we'll do, since we imported the Villanova logo, we'll drop that in and scale it down because it's way too big. And, you know, depending on your style, you could actually leave it overlapping, which is sort of what some sports broadcasters do. But we're just going to make sure that fits within the bounds. And then we want our logo panel to kind of mimic the color of our team logo. So we'll go up here to our effects control and then use the little eyedrop tool in the matte black 2, and we'll grab this light blue background. And now we have our logo panel for Villanova set. So when we go back to our main bracket, our 64 team bracket, now you'll see, if I zoom in here, you'll see that Villanova is updated with a new logo. All right. So we need to go through here, all 64 of these, 4 folders, 16 comps per folder, and we need to open up each one of these seeds and drop in whatever team logo based on the seed and the region. Again, a little tedious, but that's the best we've got right now. So once you've done that, moving on to number 2, folder 2, the region seeding. And again, we went back here, and A1 seeding is the East, A2 is the Midwest, B1 is the West, and B2 is the South. So open up A1, and as you can see, we have a composition here listed with all of our Eastern teams. It says A1 region seeding. So all these layers in here are editable, and this is where we update everything for all of our teams. So if I actually, if I go back here, since this is already updated, A2, as you can see, we imported our Villanova logo. So now we want to change the name. So we'll double click on this layer, Villanova, and we'll leave that seed 1. I really don't see an instance where you would change these seeds. They're already numbered for you, so I really wouldn't mess with these numbers. But a lot of times what you see in these tournament graphics is the record of the team. So let's say, for example, Villanova finishes 26-4. They play roughly 31 games, something like that, throughout the season. So now we've updated our Villanova information. Now, just to go back and show you what that did. Updated, so we'll zoom back in here and show you. Zoom in full. Let that quickly render. And as you can see, it has updated our bracket to Villanova, number 1 seed in the Midwest region, at a record of 26-4. And when you go through each one of these graphics, like let's say this is, I don't know who else is in here, Midwest. Is that how you spell Cincinnati? It's been a long day. I think that's Cincinnati. We'll pretend that's Cincinnati. Okay, so I'll just update a few of these just to show you what they look like. We won't worry about the logos. But another thing we can do, as I showed you, you can open up each one of these logo comps. You can actually just jump right to the region seeding folder and open this up, and you can double click each of these to open them up and then close it and then go back and go through it that way. That's a little bit more streamlined. But we'll go back to our main bracket and it'll update. And now you can see a number of our seeds. So Villanova, number 1 seed, Michigan, Ohio State, Cincinnati. So all of these are updating automatically throughout the project. And that's how the seeding works for all of these. So that's A2 and then B1. So again, if you would like, probably the most streamlined way to update all of this information is to jump directly to inside of the input information folder, jump right to region seeding and open up these 4 comps, and you can update all of the information right through those comps. So to save time, I'm not going to update too much more. We'll move on to folder number 2, which is the brackets. So as you'll see, what we have here in this seeds folder, these are our completed modules. There's nothing that we need to customize inside of any of these compositions, so we want to leave these alone. This is just a visual representation of what we just updated in a modular format. So now when we go to customize the rest of our brackets, this number 1 seeds folder is actually where we're going to grab things from. So let's say, for example, we are customizing our 64 team bracket. Actually, let's do it this way. Let's say we are customizing our Sweet 16 bracket, actually. And as you can see, I already have some teams in here from the preview, but these would be blank, and all you need to do, as the preview stated, is click and drag to update these comps. So let's say instead of actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to revert all these back so you can kind of see what this looks like a little bit easier. So sort of disregard what I'm doing here for just a second. I'm going to update all of this. Whoops. Okay. So this is what you'll see when you open up this composition, and this is how to customize it. So this is the Sweet 16. These are updated or updatable layers as well. We can customize these live text layers. But let's say, for example, in the East region, Seed 1 made it to the Sweet 16, and Seed 1 is in Envato. So we click on this top seed module here, and we make sure that this is highlighted, and then we go over here to our number 1 seeds folder, and we make sure that we're in the right region. And again, we can rename this folder to make sure that we're working with the right one. Midwest. B1 was west, and B2 was south. So there we go. Now they're all named. And let's say, for example, number 1 seed Envato made it to the Sweet 16. So we highlight that layer on within the composition window. Then we go here to the project window, and we grab this composition. Now what we do is we highlight the composition, and we hold down the Alt or Option key. And while we're holding down the Alt or Option key, we click, hold, and drag, and drop right on top of that layer, and let go of the mouse. And there we go. It automatically updated the composition for you. Now let's say, for example, let's see, what team advanced? Let's say Twitter came out of that same region, and now they're going to be facing Envato in the Sweet 16. So again, we highlight that layer within the composition window, and we go to our project window inside of this folder. Holding down Alt or Option while clicking and dragging, we then release the mouse on top, and it updates the graphic. And we could go through the entire thing like that. And that's how each one of these graphics is set up. So if we go down to, say, the Final Four, again, we have these updated. Let's say it wasn't Envato who came through. Let's say it was, well, let's put Villanova in there. Why not? So now we have Villanova in there. And then let's say Villanova plays Motion Revolver. And then over here in the South, we just have some blank teams. There we go. So that's your Final Four. And of course, we also have our championship bracket, which we can choose to render this as it's self-contained with the background or without. Just keep in mind, while you're rendering and working with the main bracket, if you have that background layer turned on, it'll actually show up here. So you want to make sure while you're working on that, turn that background layer off inside of the championship. But there we go. All right, so this zoomable 64-team bracket, you actually have to dive into each region to customize each team. But again, it's all the same. Once you've once you dive into each region, which we can do by going to folder 2 here, A1, A2, B1, B2, we can customize each module just like we did with everything else. So hopefully that covers it. Hopefully I didn't confuse you. That should be fairly self-explanatory. But I want to cover another important thing, and that is with this 64 team bracket, we're going to open up that composition. And there's a number of layers in here and a number of features that I want to make sure that we get to. Now, this default layer, default camera layer is on, and there's no animation to it other than the looping background. But in some cases, we might want to highlight a certain region on the screen. So if we want to zoom into the East region so that we can see these teams a little bit better, all we need to do is turn off the default camera and turn on the zoom to A1 camera. Now, if we hit the U key on that layer, we can see the keyframes involved here. And, excuse me, I'll actually preview this to show you what happens. So the animation sits there for just a little while, and then it begins to zoom in. Now, these keyframes might be a little bit different on the other layers because I updated this for the preview, which I'll show you in a second, but I just want to show you how this animation works. All right, almost there. As you can see, the background's moving with it. Everything's parallaxing properly. Yeah, it's a very in-depth visual effect. It's pretty neat. We'll zoom right in there to display the teams a little bit better. All right, now that we have pretty much all of the animation previewed, go ahead and play it. There it goes, zooms right in. All right, so you can zoom into the different regions just by turning on these other camera layers. Just make sure that you only have one camera layer activated or on at one given point in time. Like if we wanted to zoom into the A2 region, which is the Midwest region, yeah, these keyframes are a little bit longer than the example I just showed you. But we'll go ahead and preview that anyway, just to sort of show you. Let's see, actually, I'm going to move these back because I don't want to spend all afternoon rendering these. But just to kind of give you an idea, all right, this is going to take way too long to render. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of scrub through here. As you can see, I have all other camera layers turned off, but the animation then zooms in on the A2 region. Now, if I turn this camera layer off and turn on B1, now we're focused on the West region. We can actually move that down a little bit if we want. We can play with these keyframes. Then there's the B2 region. Now we're focused on the South region. So on and so forth. We can highlight certain regions. There's also a few more. We can zoom directly into the Final Four, which is kind of like a straight in zoom on these 4 teams here. And then there's also a zoom to the championship, which zooms way in. Kind of removes everything else except for the Final Four teams, which you can still see, but we zoom right in on the championship game. So depending on what kind of move you might want to accomplish, you just turn on the camera layers here. If you don't want any animation at all, just turn on the default camera layer and it'll remain static for you. So that's that. I think that pretty much covers it. I believe we've covered everything. I mean, as I mentioned, everything's built in After Effects, so it's all customizable. So trying to think if there's, I just thought of something. So let's say, for example, you want to denote a team that has been eliminated, for example. So let's go down here to seed 16. And our global customization parameters don't allow us to actually change the color here, because everything that we customized in the second tutorial in the global appearance folder, that all updated everything throughout the project. But what if we wanted to make this team panel, say, red to denote that it is no longer active? Well, what we could do is just highlight this layer here and then go up to Effect and say go to Color Correction Tritone, and we can make this tritone layer here like a bright red. Or we could make the middle layer a bright red, or the shadow layer a bright red or a dark red. And now when we go back to our main zoomable round, let's see if that updated, and we zoom in to our main bracket here, you can see now Snapchat's layer is now red because they've been beaten by Envato. So those are some of the other individual customizations that we can make to each individual composition to further, enhance the look. But I think that covers everything that I wanted to cover. As usual, if you have any questions still, or any comments, concerns, or if you run across any expression bugs or anything like that, please don't hesitate to contact us either on our website, motionrevolver.com, or through videohive.net. On the Motion Revolver profile page, there's a contact email form at the bottom, or you can always email me directly at tyson@motionrevolver.com. Once again, I appreciate so much you purchasing the Bracket Madness project. I hope it's easy to use, and I hope you enjoy customizing it, and good luck with your project. Hey, what's up? Tyson France with a Motion Revolver quick tip here. Just wanted to cover an issue that comes up somewhat often in some of the After Effects projects that contain 4K compositions. There are instances, obviously, where you're not going to require the 4K resolution. And sometimes as an After Effects author, creating a completely different version with standard HD resolution compositions is a fairly large undertaking. So typically what I do as an author is sometimes I will leave the project set up for 4K rendering and not actually create separate HD compositions to render directly from. So this can sometimes create confusion as to how to render a standard HD resolution clip if you aren't already familiar with how the render queue can work. So what I have in the project window here is a 4K composition. As you can see here, it's I'll bring up the composition settings. It's 3840 by 2160 pixels large, and that is standard 4K 16:9 resolution. So if we have this 4K composition, but we want to render it in a standard HD 1920 by 1080 resolution, industry standard 1080p resolution, what we can do is we can take our 4K composition and drop it into our render queue. And then where it says output module, we just click on the blue text here, whatever preset is set here. It doesn't really matter. We just click on this text, which brings up the output module settings. And what we want to do is resize this composition to be standard HD size. So we'll click the little resize button here, and we can click and drag this or click and enter something to be whatever resolution we want. Or we can click on this little custom setting here, which has a bunch of presets, which is kind of handy, and typically you're going to want to use one of these in here. So usually what you need is already set up as a preset. So if we want standard 1080, obviously you can see there's also 720 and a bunch of other standard settings here, but we'll select HDTV 1080 29.97, which would be the NTSC standard. Leave the resize quality to high, And as you can see now, it's going to automatically resize while it's rendering. It's going to resize this 4K 3840 by 2160 comp down to 1920 by 1080. And we've locked the aspect ratio here, so it's going to it's going to retain that 16:9 aspect ratio. And we can click OK, and this is going to render this composition with those settings that we just created. But clearly, if we have a bunch of 4K compositions that we want to render at 1080, we don't want to have to continue, setting this or changing the settings for each instance that's queued up to render. So what we can do is actually create a custom preset from this. So what we'll do, we'll actually revert back here. We'll just revert back to what we had here, which is the lossless setting. We'll click on this again, and then we'll make our settings again. HDTV 1080. Okay, that's all great. Everything looks good. We'll click OK. Now what we can do is click on this little arrow here, and we can click Make Template. And what this is going to do is bring up the Output Module Templates dialog box, which will allow us to save these settings that we just set. Resize is set to 1920 by 1080, high quality. Final size will be 1920 by 1080, obviously. So what we can do is, where it says Untitled 1 here, we can rename this to whatever you want it to be, but something like 4K to 1080p. So we click OK, and now this output module is saved in our presets. So we have this set to 4K to 1080p. If we have another composition in our project window that we want to render with these same settings, all we have to do is change it to 4K to 1080p. Now, if while we're changing this, I'll revert back to lossless. If while we're changing this, we hold down the command, or I believe on a PC, I believe command is control. I'm not sure of the PC setting, but on a Mac, if you hold down command and click the new setting, that After Effects will save that setting as the default. So now, if we have a third composition that we drop in, it automatically has that set. So let's say, for example, we have 10 compositions that we need to down convert from 4K to 1080. If we grab all of these compositions and drag them into the render queue, as you can see, they all have retained that preset because we held down control while we were selecting the new preset that we created. So as you can see, this sort of automates the process very well. This also works with any resolution. Say, for example, you're working with a 3K resolution composition or a 2K resolution comp that you need to downsize. You can change the settings to fit whatever needs that you require. But that's pretty much it. That's how you down convert resolutions to smaller resolutions. I hope you found it useful. If you have any comments or questions or concerns, feel free to contact us, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. But thanks a lot for watching.
Subscribe to our channel by clicking the subscribe button. Click the bell button and enjoy the latest uploads from our channel.